Welcome, 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 welcome. Welcome to Loose and Reckless. I am your host, Ray. Today I got a fun show for you guys. I want to welcome you guys back to the channel. It is 2025, the year of our Lord. It's been a great year, man. 2025 is starting off wonderful already. It feels like the world is healing itself. I've had a lot of philosophical things that I had to think about as far as how to go forward with this channel, what to do with the channel, what the purpose overall was for the channel. The If you go back into the earliest video on this channel, if you remember, it was November 4th, the night before the election, and I felt that I needed to address, or I wanted to address, the current state of what I believed or what I saw was going on in our society as far as people's perceptions politically, economically. And I've come to understanding that people are not laying down and bowing down to the globalists as much as I thought, right? But with that being said, there is a lot that people are missing. So my self-searching led me on a path over the holidays while I was spending time with my family, my kids, thinking a lot about what does this channel mean to me. Uh, Obviously, as I said before in multiple instances, I'm not necessarily doing this for any kind of notoriety. Truthfully, like I'm not trying to become some big time YouTuber. That's why I'm not extremely consistent. What I am trying to do is bring some value to certain people's lives that are following me. And that is not limited to just those who are clicking in daily and don't know me. Though that's for some of my family, friends, my children, my descendants. Like I said before, this is the dawn of a new age. We're living in a time where 100 years from now, 200 years from now, there's going to be somebody that probably has my last name, and are a direct line descendant of mine. They're going to be able to look here and look me in the eye, and I've probably been in the grave 100, 200 plus years. They're going to be able to look me while I'm looking at this camera, look me in the eye, and get whether I was a sincere person, whether I was a serious or goofy person, whatever. They're going to get to understand their ancestor in ways that was never humanly possible. So ultimately, my goal for this channel is to cover topics that I don't think that the Board of Education is covering, to cover philosophy for the most part. All right. So everything is based off of philosophy. I might touch on some economics. I might touch on some um, political stuff, current day political news. I might touch on some craziness that's happening on the internet here and there with, my series, The Hell We Talking About. So I might touch on a lot of these little things here and there, but the overarching premise to my channel is philosophy. And philosophy is primarily about how you're thinking, not necessarily what you're thinking, right? A lot of people don't realize that modern day education system is teaching you what to think. Your parents have been taught what to think. Society has been taught what to think. Society impresses on each other what to think. You get on social media, it's all enforcing what to think. You get in comment sections and people are battling about what to think, not about how to think, how to critically think about things. Philosophy, in my opinion, is the mother of culture, is the mother of societies. Without philosophy, you wouldn't have the building blocks to a culture or to a society. I believe philosophy and religion goes hand in hand. If you go back to the old Babylonian times, the Sumerian times, to any of these old times, Egyptian era, the Grecian era, the Roman era, all of these eras are encapsulated in history, and there was major events that went this way, went that way, battles that were fought between generals, major emperors, and all of these different things. These historical events were also driven by philosophy. The rulers of those eras were driven by philosophy. Economic practices of those eras were driven by philosophy. So philosophy, in my humble estimation, is the cornerstone to humanity, to what makes humans human, right? A, a lot of people that live in the religious mind state or the religious philosophy have adopted a philosophy and also adopted a way to process their thoughts. Whether you're a Muslim, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Hindu, whether you're a Jew, whether you're whatever you are, you can be an old Wiccan. Well, that is a philosophy more than it is a religion, whether you like it or not. All right, you dive into your scriptures as a Christian to understand how to process certain turmoils in your life or toils in your life, right? So philosophy is a cornerstone of being human. I don't think any animal on this planet walks around and actually philosophize why the sky is the way it is, or what their purpose on this planet is, or what do their existence mean to the others in their species. I don't think that um, any animals on this planet actually move that way, right? So this is a unique thing directly attributed to humankind. Now, why is this important for me to touch on today? Well, I believe we're living in a time where philosophy isn't important to people. To people have forgotten the importance of philosophy. They have forgotten the importance of questioning their existence, questioning our purpose, and questioning on a mass scale what what is practical and what is not practical, right? Because philosophy is very much related to the reality of experiences around you. Philosophy may change due to new experiences or due to new technologies or due to new um, power systems or people that are in power. Like during the feudal ages of the Middle Ages, the 1600s, 1400s in Europe, um, there was a lot of feudalism, right? Meaning that there were people that were lords over their districts, and this system of lord, peasant, and noble were class systems that were structured in a manner where people couldn't really freely move up and down those economic systems, right? But it was a philosophy that begot that system, right? So today I'm diving back into socialism versus capitalism. This is a topic that I've been having people request that I continue. And I also already planned on it. As you notice in my older video, I had made a socialism versus capitalism video. It was part one. So this will be part two. And in this part, we are going to dive deeply into Karl Marx. All right. Karl Marx is a very polarizing figure in history. There are people today that weigh him as a god on the philosophical scale, communist scale. So communism didn't start with Karl Marx. Um, Karl Marx was a philosopher, and he came up with ways, or should he say, outlooks and perceptions of the capitalist structure that, or should I say, he had complaints about the capitalist structure that aligned with communism and socialism practices, but he had come up with a way of combating capitalism. Whereas previously, throughout history, communism was not combating anything, it just was a practice.
Karl Marx is often described as one of the greatest thinkers of the 19th century. His writings have inspired revolutions and generated centuries of fierce debate. Born in Prussia, now Germany, in May 1818, Marx believed that capitalism, which was in its infancy at the time, had serious flaws. Marx claimed that in pursuit of profit, capitalists would encourage their ideology that work is good, leisure is bad, and material things will make us happy, embracing mass production, depriving workers of job satisfaction, at the same time exploiting the working class. He became involved in the Communist League, a small group of intellectuals who wanted to abolish the class system and spread wealth equally. Marx wrote the Communist Manifesto in 1847 with his benefactor Friedrich Engels, laying out the Marxist vision of a society where wealth is distributed evenly. Property is owned publicly, and education is free for all. But Marx was little known and little read at the time. When he died in 1883, only 11 people attended his funeral. After his death, his ideas flourished. Based on the theory of Marxism came communism, the realization of a stateless society where all are equal. Communism became a global movement, but the utopian ideal of a fair and equal society failed to materialize. Communism tyrannized and impoverished its subjects and slaughtered them in the tens of millions. Today, capitalism dominates the world. But many of Marx's criticisms have never been more relevant. Today, the global disparity between rich and poor is striking. Marx predicted that capitalism would lead to the rich getting richer and the poor staying poor. He was right. He also predicted that capitalism would lead to boom and bust economics. Marx predicted that capitalism would lead to globalization and that a handful of firms would have huge market dominance. However, Marx underestimated the ability of capitalism to make everybody richer by making products much cheaper. Since the 1980s, the number of people in absolute poverty has fallen by about 1 billion. He also got wrong the capacity of capitalism to reform itself by creating welfare states that redistributed wealth through taxation. Although there is a lot to learn from Marx, his solution was far worse than the disease. At the same time, it can't be said that today's capitalism, dominated by immense inequality and financial crises, has triumphed.
Right? Marxism actually evolved out of communism to combat capitalism. All right, and we'll get deeper into that. But first, what I want to do is I want to share with you philosophy. Let's dive a little deeper into actually what philosophy is. Right? I can share this. All right. So here in front of me, I have um, the dictionary definition, data from the Oxford. We have philosophy, a noun, the study of the fundamental nature of knowledge, reality, and existence, especially when considered as an academic discipline. See also natural philosophy. Also, a particular system of philosophical thought, Schopenhauer's philosophy, the study of theoretical basis of a particular branch of knowledge or experience, like the philosophy of science, or a theory or attitude held by a person or organization that acts as a guiding principle for behavior. All right. So, under what we will be discussing, that is primarily, that third definition is primarily what we're going to be talking about with philosophy, right? Um, what is Marxism? All right, we're going to go ahead and pull that up. Let's pull up what Marxism is. All right, so we pulled up the definition of Marxism.
Marxism.
Marxism. You hear it?
Marxism.
Marxism. All right. The political and economic theories of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, later developed by their followers, from the basis for the theory and practice of communism. What is the difference between communism and Marxism? While both communism and Marxism share some similarities, communism rejects private ownership and mandates collective ownership through the government. All right, let's talk about that. Marxism is a social, political, and economic philosophical uh, philosophy named after the 19th century German philosopher and economist Karl Marx. His work examines the historical effects of capitalism on labor, productivity, and economic development, and argues that a worker revolution is needed to replace capitalism with a communist system. Marxism posits that the struggle between social classes, specifically the bourgeoisie or the capitalists, and the proletariat or the workers, defines economic relations in capitalistic economy and will lead inevitably to a communist revolution. So let's break that down real quick. A lot of black folk that I know, we always said bougie growing up. Oh, you acting bougie. Oh, you acting bougie. We never knew what that really came from when we were saying it. It was just a saying in our culture, or what we that's debatable culture. But growing up, saying bougie meant that you was just stuck up and your nose is held high. Well, this was developed in the 1800s by Marx. Bourgeoisie. They are the people who are oppressing the worker class, the working men of America, of the world. And it's time for the working men of the world to unite and fight back these evil capitalists, right? The proletariat are the oppressed, the people that are being forced to labor and sweat and not make any profit off of their own labor, right? So that's the premise starting off. Let's see if we can get some better descriptors of this. Uh, I seen one that was better before that got a little bit more detailed. What is this? Economic theories can get confusing. This is especially true with theories such as Marxism and have evolved since they were created. Get an understanding of what Marxism is in simple terms and see how it differs from communism and socialism. If you live in America, you know how it works. Under a capitalist system, meaning there are different socioeconomic classes, you may hear these classes called upper, middle, and lower class. However, you might also hear words like blue collar worker, working poor, white collar worker, etc. All these different terms define where someone stands on their society's social economic ladder. Some classes struggle while others rule the corporate world. To analyze and remove this struggle, Marxism came into play. To define Marxism in simple terms, it's a political and economic theory where society has no classes. Every person within the society works for a common good, and class struggle is theoretically gone. Sounds simple, right? Not so much. Actually, many horror movies and dystopian books have written based on trying to create a classless utopian society. Now that you know what Marxism is, explore where this theory came from. So, what they're basically saying is uh, the road to Marxism and the ideas of Marxism, the philosophy behind Marxism, is to destroy the underprivileged, the people that come up like me. You know, I was born in a in a one parent home. I mean, my father was he's a Haitian. I've grown to know him years later in my life. I met him when I was like 15. But my mother, she was a strong single black mother. I know that's cliche, but she really was. My mother did everything for us. She put us before everyone. I'm not saying that single motherhood is great or a good thing to be applauded in general, but I applaud my mother basically because I witnessed her fruits. I witnessed the fruits of her labor. She worked, she came home. She lived very conservatively. All right. And I think that's where I get my conservative values from, which is a story from another day. Uh, But she prioritized raising her kids. She didn't put anything else in front of that. 90% of her time was dedicated to us and trying to push us forward. You know, there was a lot of things that was bad with the environment that we were living in. I was in the middle of the hood. So everybody around me was of the lower economic, socioeconomic order, right? Um, there was always there's a lot of struggles that come with that. There's individual problems that come with those classes being on the bottom rung, proximity to opportunities naturally given, right? So say if you're living in a very upper middle class neighborhood, the people that you grow up with and the people that you uh, bond to growing up and move into the workforce with, you might have more opportunities amongst your peers just by knowing them people and networking with them people, nepotism, all that. Whereas in lower economic classes, it's a little bit harder. To refrain back to Karl Marx's time, I can only imagine that it was even worse because their bourgeoisie and their um, uh, nobles and their uh, elite aristocracy during that time was all privileged being born into. You know, Europe of that time did not have pure and real capitalism. That time they had what and I hate to throw politics in it, but the last 50 to 60 years, what the leftists in this country have been creating, they had crony capitalism. And yeah, there are people on the right in this country that play the crony capitalism game. But as from my perspective and my seeing, there are a lot less in that realm because most of the politicians on the right usually come from private life. And that is something we could discuss later. It doesn't really direct straight to the argument at hand. We're trying to stay on topic with with the philosophical ideas of Marxism and capitalism. All right. Um, Where Marx's theory came from, Facebook and Snapchat weren't the first ideas to change society. In fact, they were far from it. Ideas about changing a nation go back to Socrates and Aristotle. A lot like what I was telling you before. Societies have always been moved and pushed by philosophy. Philosophy is the cornerstone to culture, is the cornerstone to societal norms. It starts in the mind first. All actions start with thoughts first, right? Um, However, in the 1800s, you had Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. Frederick Engels doesn't get a lot of airshot, and I don't know much of Frederick Engels except for him being attached to Karl Marx, which says a lot. But they were tight buddies. The biggest thing is that Engels had income and Marx had the thoughts. That's my biggest takeaway from their relationship. Engels had the income, Marx had the thoughts. Engels financed Marx. All right. Uh, if you do your research into who Karl Marx was, there's a lot of literature out there. There's a lot that he left a lot behind. All right. I don't want to dive too deep into his life and biography because what that will end up doing is turning this into an hour long prologue to just who Marx was. And I don't really want to get in. I want to attack simply the theory. But in brief, Karl Marx was a guy that was born into upper middle class family. From what I understand, his father was a lawyer. His mother uh, didn't. I don't think she had a occupation, but his father was well off and ended up sending his son to the best schools and in school, in college, as he studied in Berlin, he became a devout communist and a devout socialist. And he had a lot of problems with society and the way it was. He didn't think it was proper for people to be able to sit rich high off the hog while so many struggled. I can understand the qualms with this. But if you look in his life later on, he ended up becoming a guy who was constantly having a new idea and nonstop asking other people for money. Now, you can look at this in a way as well, damn, how did he be born into money and then die stateless? He died without money, right? Like he died with nothing to leave his family. I don't know if he had any major investments, which most likely didn't. It says he died stateless. So uh, I know a few people that remind me of this. You know, is the people that have the grand scheme of things in their mind, but don't want to make the sacrifices themselves to generate the capital to do it, or they don't want to put their own capital in it. They want to bring their capital in it. I mean, I had a time in my life where I thought that way, and I think that coming from a lower economic uh, station in life, lower social economic station in life, kind of gives you this idea. Me personally, speaking from my personal experience, gives you this idea that if I have a good idea, but I don't have the money, there's going to be somebody out here that can help me and invest into me. Well, I'm sorry to say this. This is not the norm. That is not what normally happens. Yes, we have modern day technology with things like Kickstarter, and there's different ways that you can, figure out a way to IPO a business and bring things, but that takes a lot of groundwork too. So that technology has sped up the process of being able to figure out how to get capital. Not to mention, the new platforms on how to manage and monitor your credit and build up a good credit score to get financing to start up and get capital to start up a business. There's multiple ways to climb the social economic system here in today's America, which is also a part of what I wanted to talk about. During Marx's time in the 1800s, there really wasn't. If you were born a peasant, you were going to die a peasant. And that has kind of been the status quo for all of humanity. So there is something to be said about Marx's um, anger towards capitalism when throughout all of history, the only people that got a chance to capitalize on capitalism was the people that were normally, typically born into a upper middle class socioeconomic standing. For instance, if you were a noble aristocrat and you had a daughter, and there was some Dutch of Cranberry, some guy that was a noble by birth, and he had a son that was inheriting his fiefdom, right? His territory, and you were in those circles as an aristocrat, born into wealth, right? Your daughter had privy to meet his son, and if they wanted to conjoin families, now you had wealth marrying wealth and arranged marriages, putting those children into a higher socioeconomic standard than was possible. Well, along came America and pure capitalism, where you can be born a peasant and find your way to the highest heights of nobility. Our constitution, our republic, the way it was designed, was a beautiful masterclass on how to look back throughout the eons and find a lot of things wrong with the way humans created their societies and kind of rectify them. And capitalism was one of them. We had a pure capital society where it was based off of exchange of value and merit on a freedom basis. What this does is open the door for, if I work hard enough, if I make the right decisions with my capital, if I don't just constantly expend and throw away my capital, I have right to my private property, my private earnings, and my private desires to move up the economic class. I believe I am a perfect example of this in motion. Now, for everybody, it doesn't happen in one lifetime. All right. Now, that's just being real, especially with a lot of the things that's been going on. We have a lot of policies in this country that is encroaching on pure capitalism. It makes it harder for people to actually get ahead. Whenever you involve the government to jump in and start playing puppet master to the markets, you no longer have true free capitalism, right? People feel on the leftist side of this thing that would possibly agree with Marx a lot is that you need governance. You need the government to come in and bully the bourgeoisie and constrain the bourgeoisie so that they can't just run around and abuse people and create false labor dichotomies, right? Where oh, you have to pay a certain minimum wage. Oh, you have to do well. The reality is, let me give you an example. And this is probably a good time for me to cut and go to an anecdotal example. Matter of fact, I will do that. Check this out. This guy here, Thomas Sowell.
I was so
Thomas Sowell is one of the greatest economic economists that I've ever witnessed. He is a legend in his own right. He is not going to be valued for who he was while he's alive. He will die, sadly, nowhere close to the acclaim that he deserves. And we should also be throwing him. He's probably the greatest economist of my lifetime that I have discovered. But let's hear what he has to say on minimum wage, and then I'll expound a little bit on it.
I was so lucky. I at the time I had no clue about all this. I left home in 1948. Many decades later, I learned that the unemployment rate among black teenagers in 1948, 16, 17-year-olds, was 9.4%. Among whites, so same age, it was 10.2%. So both blacks and white teenagers had only a fraction of the unemployment that they have today.
You were expected to work. You were expected to be able to get a job.
And more importantly, the jobs were there for you. What this is because of a fluke, really. The minimum wage law in the United States, Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, was passed with specified rates of pay that you're supposed to get. Almost immediately, inflation took off during the 1940s. So by 1948, those numbers that were in the law were meaningless.
Oh, I see.
In other words, when I started out as a Western Union messenger, the minimum wage was 40 cents an hour. I started out at the bottom at 65 cents an hour. So it was the same as if there was no minimum wage. And this is what happened. You had this, and I was so lucky. I knew, of course, had no clue about any of this. Now a black kid 20 years later comes in there. People have become compassionate. They've raised the minimum wage, so he can't get a job.
Got it.
And I don't think it does any community any good to have a whole lot of teenage males hanging around on the streets with no job and nothing to do.
Right.
Latest figures I saw indicated that of black youth, something like 46% of those who wanted jobs were unable to get jobs. What would you do in that situation? If you would assume for a moment that these are people who do want jobs and are unable to find work.
I would, first of all, repeal the minimum wage law, because if you go back to, say, 1950, 1948, 49, 50, you find that at that time, the unemployment rate among black teenagers was a fraction of what it is today. And there certainly wasn't any less racism then than there is today. What was different was that at that time, the minimum wage law was a decade old. It was a decade of inflation, and the law hadn't been changed. So for all practical purposes, it didn't exist.
Well, don't you think that was also a decade of expansion in which there were a lot of jobs, whereas today our economy is in a recession and there are not that many jobs
If you look
available.
at the most prosperous years of the 60s and 70s, you don't find black teenage unemployment as low as it was in the recession year of 1949. But the point is, the kid who was living where I lived then, who's living there now, he has a hell of a lot harder time finding that job because there are so many good people who try to do good for him and priced him right out of the market.
Right.
Unfortunately, the real minimum wage is always zero, regardless of the laws. And that is the wage that many workers receive in the wake of the creation or escalation of a government-mandated minimum wage, because they lose their jobs or fail to find jobs when they enter the labor force.
Right.
Making it illegal to pay less than a given amount does not make a worker's productivity worth that amount. And if it is not, that worker is unlikely to be employed.
Right.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive.
Yeah, glad to be back.
Today, we're going to be looking at the effects of...
All right. Let me address that a little bit. So when we think about minimum wage, we think about the opportunity to make it so that people can especially modern day, so people can live off of some income, right? Um, we're like, look, this lady has 3 kids and she's working at McDonald's. The minimum wage is just not enough. Now, what I'm about to say is going to show you my bias. It's going to also show you a little bit on my philosophy of capitalism. That lady should not be working at McDonald's. Well, what if there's no other job for her to get? There's always something else for her to get. There's always something else. And the reason why I say that is a competition of skill. Even right now, I'm a 41-year-old man, right? I'm 41 years old. I made my living off of building trucking company. I've been driving trucks ever since I got out of prison, right? And in 10 years, I paid off my house, right? And I'm consistently working at improving myself. Even today, right now, I'm teaching myself how to code. I'm trying to learn AI because it's inevitable to come. Why? Because I want to increase my skills. I need more tools in my toolbox. This is called personal responsibility. That lady working at McDonald's with 3 kids should not be there. It should be a 16-year-old little girl in high school trying to make some extra dollars after school working at McDonald's. It should be a senior citizen that is retired but doesn't feel like sitting at the house all the time working at McDonald's. It should not be somebody trying to raise and build a family in a entry level skillless job. This means that you are messing up. This personal accountability in our country is what is destroying our country, for one, and giving people an excuse to fall back on things like Marxism and the Marxist ideology. The worker people of the workers unite. Well, let's look at California. Minimum wage constantly keeps rising. People are now talking about a $50 minimum wage. This is leftist Marxist thinking because it's about trying to look out for the communists. Well, guess what? These places are shutting down. They're shutting down on left and right. And there's some videos I could pull on about that. There's a lot of evidence out there I could pull out about what the hell is happening in places that are taking these far left ideas on encroaching in on capitalism.
AB 1228 goes into effect, hiking the minimum wage for hundreds of thousands of fast food restaurant employees in the state from $16 an hour to $20 an hour. The change leading many restaurant owners concerned.
We're no longer hiring, we're not backfilling positions, we're not growing in the state anymore, we're not expanding more locations, and I'm ultimately thinking about selling or closing my business.
Ahead of today's wage hike, major chains, including Chipotle, McDonald's, Starbucks, Jack in the Box, and Shake Shack, warned that diners would see higher menu prices, while other chains, including Pizza Hut, announced layoffs.
All right, so our next story is California's new $20 minimum wage for fast food workers causing restaurants to close. It's been more than 2 months since the increase went into effect for large fast food chains, and one just announced that it is closing 4 dozen of its locations throughout the state. ABC 10's Becca Habegger takes a look.
Stacked chairs, empty tables, and a sign, "This location has closed," greets anyone approaching Rubio's Coastal Grill in El Dorado Hills. This Carlsbad-based restaurant chain announced late last week it's closing 48 of its more than 100 California locations. 86 locations will remain open across Nevada, Arizona, and California.
What we're seeing right now is, I think, unfortunately, the beginning of a trend, in restaurant closures.
Jot Condi is president and CEO of the California Restaurant Association. He says a newly effective California law is impacting businesses, workers, and consumers alike. AB 1228 raised the minimum wage for workers at large fast food chains in California from $16 an hour to $20. That went into effect April 1st.
When you have a cost spike overnight, $4 per employee per hour. That's pretty difficult when you're talking about an industry that's, 3 to 5% profit margin on average.
Brian Hom is a franchisee at Vitality Bowls Superfood Cafe. He operates locations up in the Bay Area in San Jose and Los Gatos. They are statewide, though. He joins me now with more. What a day for you, sir. Thanks so much for being with us tonight here in Los Angeles. How is this impacting your franchises up there in the Bay Area? Did you raise prices today, and if so, by how much?
Yeah, we raised prices today 5 to 10%. And, my concern is the increased price will deter my customers from returning. It's a significant increase, for the state of California, 25%. And I'm afraid that we will not have enough revenue to cover the cost of this wage increase. It's now becoming, the price of becoming, it's a luxury to go out and eat now. It's not just a normal, I want to go get something to eat. Some of my customers said they may start just cooking at home, not going out anymore.
Yeah. So, for instance, you said 5 to 10% price increases today. Did you hear specifically? I know you just mentioned that some customer says I may have to just not come here and be your customer anymore, sir. I have to cook at home. Is that really across the board that you heard that today?
Well, I haven't. I'm in the store every day because it's a small business, family owned. My wife, my 2 sons, and my daughter-in-law work there. And yeah, I talk to people, and they're looking at the prices, and they're thinking, before where they would just come in, throw in their credit card. Now they're, looking at alternative types of food. Mm-hmm. But fast food is going to be a lot higher for everybody. And I'm concerned, like I said, I may have to start cutting hours, laying off, eventually maybe even closing the store, which, I'm a community store. We opened up for the last 7 years because we're food allergy safe. My 18-year-old son had died from a food allergy. Oh. So I created this store to honor him and as well as educate people so we pass the ball. I have EpiPens in my store, so it has personal, it's a personal thing that this store, I have a passion behind the store because it's healthy eating and it's food allergy safe. I have many customers who come in because I know how, fatal a food allergy can be.
Oh my gosh, sir, I'm so sorry. I had no idea about the loss of your son. So thank you for sharing that. Obviously, this is part of your business model. Worst case scenario, you just said that you may have to shut down. How soon would you be making that decision to do that?
Well, first of all, we just raised prices today. So I'm in there every day. I'm trying to get a feel of my customers to see how much of an impact that is for them to take the increase. And also, it's labor is like the second highest behind the cost of, goods sold. So while I have to look at, do I need to cut hours? In one of my stores, we were running with 4 or 3, we're down to 2. So now, we got to continually look, we definitely have stopped hiring. And now, now we got to look at, can we maintain the people? But it's too early to say because today's the first day.
Well, so you've stopped hiring, increased prices, and you may have to cut back on hours. Well, again, I know it's been quite the day for you. Brian Hom with Vitality Bowls, we appreciate you. And when I'm up in the Bay Area, I'll make sure. I know you have a location in Santa Rosa where my mom lives. I will definitely frequent your store. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Well, today's wage hike for those roughly 540,000 fast food workers represents a huge spike from this date 10 years ago when California's minimum wage was $8 an hour. With more on the impact the new fast food minimum wage will have on consumers, I'm joined by Sean Hyatt, Associate Professor of Management and Organization at the USC Marshall School of Business. Professor Hyatt, thank you so much. I think you just heard my conversation with Brian Hom, a franchisee. That's a lot of bad news just in, a 3-minute time span. What's the upside of this new law?
What Brian said is kind of typical what we expect to happen with this law. The upside is we can see greater automation and innovation in the state of California. If I were investing, I'd invest in Miso Robotics and Pyramid, a German company that makes the kiosks for these franchise and fast food restaurants, because if they're going to survive, they will at some point have to automate. And these are the makers of the automated robotics in the back as well as the front-facing customer side.
I mean, that's an upside. But then again, if I'm a fast food worker and I'm saying, hey, I'm really happy with my, $4 increase that I got today, that doesn't sound like much of an upside for me because I'm going to be replaced by a machine.
That is correct. I mean, in the aggregate, this will have a negative impact on fast food workers because there's just going to be fewer of them. The prices can only be sustained so much. I mean, notice what he said, and this is what we're seeing also in the research, right? That and what the calls of quarterly calls of McDonald's and other leaders is they've risen. The prices have gone up so much over the last 4 years because of many different factors, supply chain issues, inflation, fiscal stimulus from the government, that now McDonald's is extremely concerned. I'm just going to use them as an example, that those under $45,000 are not frequenting anymore their restaurant. And this is a big concern because that's where they had the highest volume. Now, keep in mind, places like Brian's and McDonald's, because it's such a low margin business, it's all about volume. They have to have many, many people coming in all the time. If fast food becomes much more of a luxury good item that's only purchased once in a while, these businesses cannot survive.
You know what I've heard a lot is from people about, they see the corporation names, Starbucks, McDonald's, huge profitable companies. Why can't they offset the cost themselves from the top down?
Well, what we are going to see with them, they're going to be the ones most likely to survive because they've got the large corporate investment money. So they can receive, especially even the franchise owners who run these, can work with McDonald's to get those capital investments to buy like a Flippy, which is that automated robot that makes the burgers and the fries. I mean, if you run, just look at the economics of Flippy, okay, that can do everything in the back. One Flippy that runs 18 hours a day, essentially, after the costs and the service and everything, works for $7.30 an hour. Wow. So you can replace 3 workers with one automated robot in the back end if you've got the capital money to buy it and invest in it in the first place.
I think we did a report on the Flippy. Is it opening up in Pasadena?
Well, the reality is if you don't have a minimum wage, which is a socialist, Marxist, leftist idea in the first place, not saying that there isn't gray areas. I think there are gray areas and an argument to be had on certain social programs or social legislation, right? I think there's a mix, there's a yin and a yang that is a sweet spot that you have to balance because there is no solutions. There's always trade-offs. You're going to move a lever one way or the other, right? And there's sometimes sweet spots that find itself a little bit more on the leftist side of things, and then sweet spots that find itself a little bit more on the right side of things, right? Like I think the overall positive thing about police, this is a social contract. This is a leftist idea to pay a certain amount of tax to your local government so that that local government can then redirect funds for security, right? I feel like that's a necessary evil because in my mind, as a libertarian conservative, I live in a reality where I think that people should be left to their own devices and we should try to conserve old traditions and be less governed, right? The governed should be less governed. I'm always erring to that side. But I can see the leftist side of this where, yeah, not everybody wants to abide by that agreement. Not everybody wants to just leave you the hell alone, right? And some people want to steal what you have worked and earned and worked hard for, right? Some people look at you and envy what you have. They want to break in your house, take some of your stuff. I think you should have. That's where part of my rightist outlook comes from. Where, yeah, I should have the right for a Second Amendment. I should be able to blow somebody's head off if they walk in my house unannounced and trying to rob me for something. And I should also then be able to call the police, and they should be able to come help on any scene that I need the police from. That is a necessary evil. So there's a balance to these things. And those things, that is why healthy debate should always happen in our country. What is happening, we have a progressive side that doesn't want to debate or don't want to talk. They just want to hurl names at you and throw out bullshit because they have been taught not to philosophize. They have been taught not to embrace philosophy. They have embraced a philosophy that was given to them, but not how to put it in practice themselves, right? So that kind of builds back one of the biggest arguments of this video that I'm trying to bring is the fact that we do not inherently see the value in philosophy anymore, which leaves the door open for our kids to go to a social program, which is the Board of Education, and get programmed 8 to 9 hours out the day by academics who have never lived in the private sector and have no clue how capital is acquired and generated to teach our kids how to operate in the private sector. That makes no sense, right? So it's easy for them to fall into college and jump into these Marxist teachers' ideologies that they were 9 times out of 10 given. They'd never put any of their thoughts to practice. They just think that if we group up and yell and scream enough, things should go our way. And I'm sorry to say this, but there's a thing called the Pareto principle. If any of you have never heard of the Pareto principle, I'm going to share that with you right now. Let's get into the Pareto principle real quick, so you kind of see what this is. All right, so Pareto principle. Let me see. This shows it right here. All right. The Pareto principle is known as the 80-20 rule. All right. Hold on. What's going on? Okay, there we go. The Pareto principle is also known as the 80-20 rule, the law of the vital few, and the principle of factor sparsity. States that for many outcomes, roughly 80% of consequences come from 20% of the causes, right? In 1941, management consultant Joseph M. Juran developed the concept in the context of quality control and improvement after reading the works of Italian sociologist and economist Vilfredo Pareto, who wrote in 1906 about the 80-20 connection while teaching at the University of Lausanne. In his first work, Cours de non politique, I'm not French, so I can't really pronounce that properly. Pareto showed that approximately 80% of the land in the Kingdom of Italy was owned by 20% of the population. The Pareto principle is only tangible if related to the Pareto efficiency. Mathematically, the 80-20 rule is roughly described by a power law distribution, also known as Pareto distribution. For a particular set of parameters, many natural phenomena are distributed according to the power law statistics. It is an adage of business management that 80% of the sales come from 20% of the clients. All right. Let me put this into perspective. If you look at the National Basketball Association, NBA, how many kids always desire to go up to the basketball? Well, a minor percentage of people who ever desired to make it to the NBA ever go. People that dreamed of going to the NBA, probably for every 1,000, there was probably one. And before that prerequisite of even getting into the NBA, they got to make it on a college court, college team for the most part, right? You do have your outliers like the Kobe's or the LeBron Jameses who were just phenomenally, outrageously gifted, right? That's to say the least. That got to skip that step of going to college. But think about the amount of people that went to college and played college basketball that make it to the NBA. If you do the math, roughly about 20% of them actually ever make it to the NBA. This is the Pareto principle in action. Same thing with the NFL, same thing with the top scientists, same thing with the top earners in the country, same thing with the richest people in America that make over $500,000 a year. It's a minute portion of the population that always rises to the top for various reasons. It could be DNA, genetics. It could be work ethic. It could be a number of things. But this 20% is usually carrying the tax payload on the economy, providing majority of the taxes, right? It's usually those that provide the majority of the jobs. If you work in the private sector and work for a private company, The person who created that private organization that allowed you to work for them or employs you, 9 times are part of the cream of the crop of our population that pushes the population forward. 20% always rises to the top. And out of that 20%, 20% of that 20% rises to the top. We are always going to be led by the minute that is pushing us further into the future, whether that's technological advances, whether that's cultural advances, whether that's performance level advancements. Is always going to be a minute portion of the population that rises to the top. And that's just going to always happen. Is that fair? Who says it is or it isn't? I think it should be an amoral thing to look at. Evolution, if you believe in Darwinism, I look at Darwinism as a very provable fundamental it's a provable fundamental observation in my mind. I mean, we could see how we affected how we did a pseudo Darwinism on dogs, right? They went from wolves to chihuahuas. How did we get to chihuahuas from a wolf, right? Because of what we wanted out of the species. And the species in turn adapted. They adapted by selection because we selected, even though not naturally, things that we wanted to care for. So you have these people in the early 1400s, 1500s, aristocracy that wanted a hand dog that they could carry around like a damn domiciled cat, right? And they bred specifically for that. And over time, you came out with the Chihuahua because there was parts of each breed, each litter that people selectively pulled out and selectively forced mated. So doing this forced evolution, you've proven Darwinism in your face. So I could see over thousands of years how species can change and things of that nature. And that's why I feel like, humankind should be moving in that same direction itself also. So Pareto principle, I believe that as humans, we have always followed the 20% into the future. It just so happens the 80% tends to like to blame the 20% for all of their woes, which is why Marxism is such an appealing thing, which is why Marxism is so dominating in the education system. And the Communist Manifesto has been the preeminent authority on Marxism, on communism in the West over the last 100 years. So let's open up what the Communist Manifesto is, right? Communist Manifesto, originally the Manifesto of the Communist Party. It is the political pamphlet written by Karl Marx and Frederick Engels, commissioned by the Communist League and originally published in London. In 1848, the text is the first and most systematic attempt by Marx and Engels to codify for wide consumption of historical materials idea that the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles, in which social classes are defined by the relationship of the people to the means of production. Means of production, I said that in the first part of this series. Means of production is the culminating, all encompassing result of people's efforts, technology, or labor, right? Something they produce, right? The means of production. Communists want there to be no private ownership of means of production, whereas capitalists want private ownership of means of production. I want to go out here and be able to bust my ass for whatever I bust my ass for and take it home. Communists want it so that I go out here and bust my ass, no matter how hard I bust my ass, and share it with everybody else. Fundamentally, I'm totally against it. You can call it what you want, but that is the bare premise of the idea and the ideology. I don't think it's correct that somebody can sit around, work 2 hours a week, doing whatever to fit whatever need they want. And then I work 60 or 70 hours a week because I'm determined, and you hack and slash what I'm doing to provide for the guy that works 2 hours a week. In no way in my mind does that ever make sense to me. And the only way it makes sense to certain people is because they live in that mindset where they are a victim and where they do think that there's a bunch of greedy rich people out here holding them from their dreams. For some reason, a lot of people that think socialist minded think that there's some kind of limit to this wealth pie. Like there isn't new forms of wealth being created every day. Like there isn't winners or losers every day. Some days you may win, some days you may lose. I've lost money in the stock market plenty of times. I've made money in the stock market plenty of times. I've lost money running businesses plenty of times. I've made money running business plenty of times. I've lost money or time trying quitting jobs. I've made money getting jobs. It's all in your perspective and how you're going to manage your money once you get your means of production. Are you going to invest in your own private house? Are you going to go to school for an education that will not pay you anything? You have the right in a capitalist society to go and pay $500,000 for a human a gender studies degree. What does that actually do for you? What kind of means of production do you see yourself getting out of college after spending 4 years with a gender's degree and $500,000 in debt? I'm being hyperbolic with the 500,000, but I think right now it's at about 100,000 to get a degree like that. What are you going to do when 90% of most there's a lot of females out there that's going into those type of disciplines? Are y'all all going to compete for gender studies positions at universities all over the country and get these inflated salaries, which in turns makes the tuitions higher? But in the private sector, gender studies has no relevance. You can't grow a business knowing gender studies. What kind of business can you go and build with a gender studies business degree? Maybe you can go and build a consultation service for companies that value the thoughts of gender differences, possibly. I mean, that's me throwing a bone in that place. But me personally, as a company owner myself, I'm not hiring a consultations company to tell me the difference between girls and boys or this plethora of new genders that just came to existence in the last 20 years or whatever the hell years it's been around. I'm not paying a consultation service for that. 9 times out of 10, I'm not paying a consultation service for anything because the vast majority of consultation services are there to win on the entry. That's a whole nother level of business that we could talk about. But they win on the entry because they come in with a set price, tell you what they think is wrong or right with your business, try to give you advice on scaling your business some kind of way, and then they ride off into the sunset whether you succeed or fail. Meanwhile, they probably ostracize you from your inner circle of people that actually helped you build it to the point where you can afford consultants. And the people that you most likely trust are alienated because you're taking now these new strangers' words that you're paying for their valuable critique over the people that helped you build it from ground one and your own intuition, right? So I see no purpose in consultations at the moment. You know, there's places for it. I believe there is. There's always exceptions to that rule or any rule, I believe. But in general, there's no purpose to consult somebody about the differences between calling somebody they, them, him, her, she, him, or it, right? So yeah, that's my take on that. Sorry to get a little bit off track a little bit. Marx and Engels combined philosophical materialism with the Hegelian dialectical, sorry about my pronunciation, method in order to analyze the development of European society through its modes of production, including primitive communism, antiquity, feudalism, and capitalism, noting the emergence of a new dominant class at each stage. The text outlines the relationship between the means of production, relations of production, forces of production, and the mode of production, and posits that changes in society economic base affect changes in the superstructure. Marx and Engels assert that the capitalism is marked by the exploitation of the proletariat, working class, or of wage laborers by the ruling bourgeoisie, which is constantly revolutionizing the instruments and relations of production, and with them the whole relations of society. They argue that capital's need for a flexible labor force dissolves the old relations and that its global expansion in search of new markets creates a world after its own image. The manifesto concludes that capitalism does not offer humanity the possibility of self-realization, instead ensuring that humans are perpetually stunned and alienated. It theorizes that capitalism will bring about its own destruction by polarizing and unifying the proletariat, and predicts that a revolution will lead to the emergence of communism, a classless society in which the free development of each is the condition for the free development of all. Marx and Engels proposed the following transitional policies: the abolition of private property in land and inheritance, introduction of a progressive income tax, confiscation of rebels' property, nationalization of credit, communication and transport, expansion and integration of industry and agriculture, enforcement of universal obligation of labor, and provision of universal education, and abolition of child labor. The text ends with three decisive sentences, reworked and polarized into the famous call for solidarity. Does that sound familiar? Solidarity. We stand in solidarity. We speak truth to power. Does that sound familiar? The slogan, workers of the world unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. Now, I want y'all to really take that in the heat. Now, of course, go get the book if you desire to go in depth about the whole perspective. I fundamentally disagree with the premise, all of the premise, the solidarity slogan, the workers of the world unite. I've been a worker, I've been a lower class, I've been a middle class, I've been upper middle class, never been filthy rich. I would like to experience that, but hey, maybe my son or maybe me in the old age, I'll be there. It looks like I probably will be there. Truthfully, just being honest. And I'm not mad at that. I mean, I hope any of you watching aren't mad at that. I wish it all for all of you. I don't think there's a limit to wealth. I don't think there's a limit to how many people can be wealthy in pure capitalism. Why? Because it's not a closed pie. It's not a fixed pizza where there's only certain slices. There's new technology being born every day. Like I just told you, I'm learning AI now. Why is a 41-year-old man who has a career set, retirement set, house paid for, why am I learning AI? Because I'm taking personal responsibility and trying to capitalize on a new market. It's new. There's no way to understand what AI is going to mean to humans in 20 years. And I get it, the dystopian futures of Terminator and all the other good stuff. Well, I say this. I believe that AI is going to be a lot less dangerous than what people think. And I also believe that AI can only be as dangerous as the people programming it. I also believe in the idea of free markets and choice. I don't want just a bunch of evil money grubbing, government controlled organizations controlling the totality of AI. I want AI to be as open of a marketplace as any other marketplace with as much people involved so that the good can combat the bad. Because ultimately, I do believe in the principle that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. If you centralize anything, it has its own potential to be corrupted. And fundamentally, the classless society, the workers unite, is a fundamental fallacy because you're still going to need boards of something, governments of something. You're going to elect for governments. You're going to elect for representatives. And this bourgeoisie and proletarians, all these socialists are all trying to make themselves the bourgeoisie. Look at modern day, right? Look at modern day politics. Look at the AOCs of the world. Oh, ever since she jumped up to be in Congress, she damn sure protecting her riches, right? Her $175,000 income every year guaranteed, right? It's funny how what his name Bernie Sanders. Funny how once he became a multimillionaire, he stopped talking about how bad multimillionaires were, right? Once he started selling a whole bunch of books, he was no longer talking about millionaires. He went to start talking about billionaires, right? Right? They want to make this type of money. The academics want to be rich, but they want to be rich off tax dollars. They want to have their own end clubs off of tax dollars, right? Communist Manifesto is a blueprint on how to separate and divide societies, not necessarily how to move societies forward. In the early 1900s, the leftists in this country started using the division of classes to separate women and invigorate a feminist movement. It's also used to invigorate the victim narrative from Black people. We have always been the lower class and downtrodden since slavery. We have always been the people who have been looked over and stepped on. We are a part of the working class. We need to unite. This is all Marxist theory. It's not new. It's just because you don't know Karl Marx and know the works doesn't mean that you're not influenced by it. All of academia is influenced by it. It is one of the most intellectual arguments put forward today, even when they don't directly say Communist Manifesto. It's always about the big billionaires manipulating our government, the big billionaires stealing from the lower class, the big capitalists. All of this is Marxism. If you ever thought about how the wealth is pulled at the top and the rich are getting richer, you were influenced by the sayings of the Communist Manifesto, and you don't even know it.
We're going to need more revenues, and in order to do that, that starts with higher rates for the folks at the top.
It didn't work. Top-down economics never works. The country doesn't succeed when only the rich get richer.
All right? When women yell out the patriarchy and class and this and that, they are influenced by the manifesto and they don't even know it.
I think that the criticism is helpful. I also think that it might, I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories.
So it's important to know these things. It's important to have an understanding of historical philosophy and find out exactly where you stand and why. I stand on the side of capitalism, number one, because I believe in trying to bring value to people. There's a wonderful book that I live my life by. Matter of fact, let me grab it. I'm going to show you. This is an endorsement. This is an endorsement of this book. Laws of Success. I keep this at the top of my house. This book single-handedly revolutionized how I see the world, how I went from a victim to a victor, how I decided to no longer be bound by the chains of my upbringing, no longer be bound to the cultural norms that I thought I had, and also to shake the last 100 years of Marxism that was embedded in my mind, because I was a victim. Oh, I was a victim. Oh, it was the white man this, it was the white man that, it was the rich crackers this, it was the rich crackers that. I was racist, I was everything. This book freed me from all of that and also made it possible that within 10 years of being out of prison, I own my own home, I got my own freedom, I got my own path. My wife, my kids are happy, all because of the Laws of Success by Napoleon Hill. Get the book. Check it out. It may do some things to you. But in this book, there's one principle that has 100% changed my life. 100% changed my life. It was called do more than is asked of you. Now, what does that do? What does do more than is asked of you do? Any of you that call yourself socialists, Any of you that call yourself Marxists, right? How many times have you ever had that philosophy in your mind that no matter what I do, let me do it better than what anybody expected me to do it? If I go to work and my employer wants me to do this or do that and do this, no, I'm not going to do just that. I'm going to find out how to do more than what they asked of me. I'm going to do more than what they ask of me, because that's going to put me in that 20% of the Pareto principle to lead the crowd. That is going to help me further the crowd and further the evolution of my agenda and my family's agenda, right? You want to be a part of the 20%, and there's no faster way than doing more than what is asked of you. You do, whether that's in a relationship, you do more than what's asked of you for your wife, for your husband. They will love you more because they didn't expect you to be so good. My wife goes above and beyond every day for her family, and I witness it. I watch her consistency. I watch how she goes above and beyond what the average person is expected of as a wife, and it makes me love her more. And I see it in every work of life, everywhere I go. The people who want to skate out of work and they're the ones who are usually in and out of jobs here and there, can't find any consistent income because they're always the victim. No, show up, do what you're asking, do more. Laws of Success. Pick this book up. It'll revolutionize your life. It's a big book. It's a lot to it, but it's worthy read. This is my Bible. All right. All right. But so yeah, where was I? I got a little bit off track. I can get a little long-winded. You guys know that by now. Thank you for sticking with me. Let me see if I can close this thing out. Pareto principle. We got covered that. Marxist manifesto. Okay, I do want y'all to take some time to dig into the Communist Manifesto when you get a chance. We're coming up past my hour mark. I try to keep these videos a little bit digestible, and it's hard. It's hard to pick out these topics and not go on and on about them because they're intricate. There's a lot to them. But I'm taking the advice of my auntie, my wonderful aunt. She gave me the advice to just take it in bite-sized strides and put it out as, as it comes, individually. So this is part 2, right? This was part 2 of socialism versus communism. Digest this. Do some more research on Karl Marx. I would like to, on the future episodes or parts of this series, be able to talk and refer to the Marxism and communism in terms where you guys kind of got an idea of where it comes from. If you are confused about anything, if you have any questions about anything, please comment in the bottom. And if you have a disagreement with me about anything, comment in the bottom. Let's help evolve this conversation. I think it's one that isn't talked about enough. I know you hear certain people yell and throw out Marxism or communism a lot, and a lot of people don't really know what it is or don't really care to figure what it is. So hopefully I did at least an adequate introduction to what communism and particularly Marxism is, because Marxism is at the root of all of our problems here in the West, at all of them. And I think that if this devil or demon is not exposed, it will slip right back into the conscience. I think this last election showed that people were not down with the globalist stuff, and how globalism and Marxism is conjoined is very intricate, which, like in my first couple episodes, I talked about how I was going to point out all of these major globalist players. But I came to realize that there's certain fundamental things and fundamental arguments that have to be laid out before I start getting into the nefarious activities of these people like George Soros or Charles Schwab or any of these. There's so many people that's playing this game out here. And to understand the tools that they're using, first we have to start digging into the philosophy